welcome on into another edition of the Between the Hashmarks podcast. As always, I'm Matt Lombardo, joined by my friend, colleague, mentor, and the purveyor of the Too Deep Zone, Mike Tanier. And Mike, if it's a Tuesday afternoon, it must mean that there is some Jets breaking news for us to get into on the podcast.
Tuesday afternoon is never ending. Wednesday morning, Aaron Rodgers didn't come. It's another Jets Tuesday plea for attention, and we're at the epicenter of it.
And they certainly delivered some big news today. We'll get into it in a whole lot more. A little bit later on, I'll be joined by Los Angeles Rams starting safety and defensive captain Quentin Lake. Can't wait to have that conversation and hear what he has to say on Matthew Stafford, with a trajectory of the offense, what that defense is building into. We're going to get into the playoff race in the AFC, which took a wild turn over the last 24 hours or so in East Rutherford. But before we do, a little bit of housekeeping, as always, if you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store, on Spotify, subscribe to my YouTube channel at Matt Lombardo 975. And over there on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. We'll read the reviews on the show. And of course, if you enjoy Mike Tanier's analysis, you have to subscribe. I'm begging you, as one NFL analyst to an NFL fan, go subscribe to the Too Deep Zone. You won't be disappointed. And of course, you can read my analysis at Between the Hashmarks on Substack as well.
Yeah, make sure you check out Matt. Make sure you check out me. And I can't wait to hear this conversation you're having later.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And I think that in a lot of ways, Aaron Rodgers is just having fun and toying with Joe Douglas and the New York Jets. Because last week, of course, they tossed Robert Saleh off the plane into the Atlantic Ocean on the flight back from London.
Right.
And now a week later, 8 days later, Davante Adams is reunited with Rodgers. What's your initial take here, Mike? Because I spent the morning sending text messages, having conversations with people inside the league, trying to make sense of why the Jets did this and did this now. Before we get into that, what was your takeaway from this move?
First thought is Greg Zuerlein had to be like, I'm off the hook. He ain't getting me fired for missing those field goals. He's busy elsewhere. That's the first take on that. Secondly, I think for you and I, we don't have Davante Adams to kick around for the trade deadline anymore. What are we going to do for Bills, Chiefs, Ravens, Commanders content? What are we going to do? But, I'm interested to hear what you're hearing around the league. I've got some odds and things. I want to talk about those, but I'm interested first. What are you hearing around the league about this?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think that there's a sense that he's going to help the offense. But as you and I have talked about the last couple of weeks, the issues with the Jets offense run much deeper than any one wide receiver can fix. Quote from an NFC personnel executive, he's not going to make any impact at all if they can't block for that quarterback. Davante is still a good player who Aaron Rodgers has confidence in, and that matters, but he's not the player that he once was. And that seems to be, there's not necessarily a consensus on what Rodgers is going to get in Davante Adams and how much he's going to help that offense. But it seems to be that the foundational issues with the Jets are, you drafted Olu Fashanu in the first round, you signed Tyron Smith in free agency, and your quarterback has still been sacked 16 times.
Right. Had a couple of sacks last night that were like big lapse sacks, like lapse in coverage. Against a good Bills defense, certainly. But, for something like this, I was looking at it and like, this is one of those super expected things, like,
yes,
Adams to the Jets. We were probably talking about it in June. So like sometimes a money line is worth 1,000 words. And here are the money lines I just pulled up. So the market has had a little time to react.
Goodness gracious, I thought you were going to say a money line was worth $1,000. And I was like, what am I going to throw $1,000 on this just about to come out of your mouth?
Oh, God, no. Do not put $1,000 on anything Jets related. The Jets are now plus 500 to win the AFC East. And again, the market's had a couple hours to react. It might drift a little bit. Plus 500, they were plus 700 right before the trade, but plus 500 to win the AFC East. The Cardinals are plus 500 to win the NFC West. That's how weak that money line is. The Jets are plus 155 to reach the playoffs. That's in the same range as the Bengals and the Colts. Okay. Their odds of winning the Super Bowl are holding steady at plus 3,000. So the Jets were at plus 3,000 to win the Super Bowl last week. They're at plus 3,000 now. Now, remember, they lost a big game in between.
Yes.
So, the best thing you can say about the Davante Adams trade right now is it kind of offsets last night's loss. It's like, even though they lost the Bills, and that should be cratering them on a lot of fronts in terms of their chances of doing anything, the Adams trade brings them back to, they can be a playoff team. They can be the Colts. You know what I'm saying? They can be this this second or third wild card team that creeps in. That's kind of where he lands, and we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about this in the days and weeks to come. That's what we're talking about here. The sixth seed or the seventh seed, maybe, in the AFC.
Right. And we talked about this trade last week, and we both were of the agreement that Joe Douglas should be going all in to get Davante
Yes.
Adams based on firing Robert Saleh, based on the fact that they had tripled down already on Aaron Rodgers. So why not quadruple down on Aaron Rodgers at this stage, especially with Joe Douglas's job on the line, very much so with how this season has started to play out. So I
Right.
can't necessarily kill the move, but I
No.
think I'm kind of where one of the coaches that I spoke to is in all of this. And he said, quote, agreeing with the executive I had a conversation with, Davante would make a lot more of an impact if he could block, but
Yeah.
he's going to make an impact. He's going to
Right.
force coverage to his side of the field, and that should help the running game a little bit as well, unquote. And you look at what the Jets did last night. If they did anything well, it was that they got both Breece Hall and Braylon Allen involved. They were really one-dimensional in the running game over in London against the Vikings. It was nice to see Breece Hall get back involved. But you look at the receiving core, you put Adams on one side, you have the second favorite target of Aaron Rodgers' career, Alan Lazard. You have Garrett Wilson, who might or might not have regressed a little bit this year, but it's going to create opportunities for everybody else in that offense, with the caveat, as both insiders pointed out, that the Jets can keep Aaron Rodgers upright.
Right. And Rodgers has very limited mobility at this point, which contributes to that. We keep talking about more and more weapons around him, which is not something that you sort of have to do if he's a top 5 quarterback anymore. But I think it does raise the floor on the Jets. Like, they wouldn't lose to the Broncos now in this
Right.
situation. They took a Broncos loss. So when you look at the 2 Dolphins games, you look at the Patriots game coming up down the road a little bit, it raises the floor, like eliminates the crater upset potential in those games, and that keeps them at this point where we thought they were at the preseason, where this is going to be like a 9-win, 10-win team. I don't know what it does for their ceiling, because I think their ceiling is capped by the offensive line, by the fact that the defense has taken a little step back, and by the fact that Rodgers is a top 15 quarterback, not a top 5 quarterback.
And probably closer to 13, 14, or
Yeah.
15 than he is to 10 or 11 there, based on what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Those are the big issues facing the Jets. But again, I think this was a move that they had to make. And I'm with you. I don't know that it raises the ceiling. I think that they kind of are what they are. And if we're going to talk about them getting into the postseason, they're still not going to beat a Kansas City. They're still not going to beat a Baltimore, especially with that defense and that secondary. If the Bengals get in, which I don't know that they're going to, but you get the win in New York, who knows what happens there. But if Joe Burrow gets hot and they get in, I don't know that the Jets can score enough to keep pace with what the Bengals can do at their best. So they're a fringe playoff team, which to me is still a little bit of a step back from where we were at the beginning of the year, talking about this team when you speak to insiders around the league as one of those teams that could surprise to the upside. I just don't think that they're going to live up to that. And I don't think that Rodgers or Adams moves that needle very much.
No. And one of the reasons why they're a fringe playoff team now is that the Dolphins have fallen off of that conversation. The Browns, who preseason coming off last year were in that conversation, have fallen off of it. There's really nobody in the AFC West besides the Chiefs, or the AFC South besides the Texans, and maybe the Colts. But like, when you start talking about, well, the Colts are that other fringe wildcard team, that's an easy field to stay part of, and the Jets are solidifying themselves in that field. So I get it. You quadruple down because you don't have a choice. Joe Douglas got thrown a milk bone. Good boy. You get to play GM for a couple more weeks. And this is where we are with this team. And again, we're going to spill a lot of ink and a lot of attention because they're attention hogs.
And what do you make of Aaron Rodgers' comments last night about the penalties? That why even play the game if they're going to call some of these flags, even the roughing the passer they called to his benefit? What's your takeaway on those complaints? Because it seemed kind of bizarre to me, because they benefited from so many of those calls. But I thought that last night's game was really an embodiment of the penalty feature that you wrote a couple weeks ago about. Yes, your eyes aren't deceiving you. Penalties are way up across the league, and some of these calls are starting to really impact the outcome of games.
Right. You get these games, a couple of them per week, where it feels like it's been litigated beyond recognition. Like, you're not sure who played better watching the game, because you have to like take into account, well, that play was called back and that was a borderline penalty. The Bills before halftime had a deep pass that looked like it went 5 yards out of bounds, and there was some contact with the receiver, and that was called pass interference, and
Right.
that led to a touchdown. Rodgers did complain about a holding penalty. I didn't go back and really look at that play, but I saw in the Eagles Browns game, I saw a bunch of plays, and they were Browns plays where they get 10, 15 yards near the red zone, called back for a holding penalty. You look at it, and it was kind of like the blocker, the outside for a second, and they're calling that. When you start to doubt whether the best team won or whether it was decided that way, it gets hard to really enjoy the games, and it becomes increasingly common. We saw a couple weeks ago the Giants Cowboys Thursday night game.
Oh, it was a penalty flag fest. It was a flag every other snap. And that's another one of those games where if I remember, there was a drive by the Giants late in the first half that got stalled out by a penalty that maybe that changes the outcome of the game, or at least the trajectory of it, with Malik Neighbors still healthy before that concussion. So yeah, I'm with you. And watching that game on Monday night against the Bills and the Jets, I had a hard time focusing on the game because it was just so disjointed, and it seemed like there was a flag on every deep ball that was a deep play
Yeah.
that was run.
Right, and because the first quarter was very clean, and I'm like, "Oh, this is moving along," and then it got dumber and dumber and dumber as the game went on in terms of that. And you do, like, one of the risks you get is, well, let's just keep throwing deep. Like, the strategy just becomes, well, we keep throwing deep, throwing deep, throwing deep. If they're calling these flags, we'll get defensive holding, we'll get pass interference, and we'll just come away with that. And no one wants that. And I don't know what the solution is, but what happens when these refs get into that point where they start throwing the flag? It's like they get into a jag, and you
Yeah.
get this 45-minute period where you'll get, like, 15 penalties in the game. And you're right, drive stall because of multiple penalties that look like they could have not been called. And you come away with it saying, did the best team win? Did I really see a good representation of an athletic competition, or did I see a penalty expo?
And I know that it's an awful solution because of how discombobulated and
Oh no,
herky-jerky would make the experience.
I know what you're saying.
Put a sky judge in every stadium and review everything. You want to review the hold that was missed on the bomb that went 65 yards for a touchdown? Have a guy watch it for 10 seconds and buzz down. You want to review whether or not a guy, tackled him in the end zone, whether it was called pass interference or not? Have a guy watch it for 15 seconds and buzz down and say, hey, that's a penalty, we need to call it. Or you know what, that wasn't an illegal hands to the face, pick up the flag. There's just too much invested, not just in the enjoyment of fans watching the game, but with the influence that sports betting now has over the NFL, over the way that people watch and consume this sport. There's too much literally invested to have so many outcomes and so many big plays decided on, well, was that roughing the passer or wasn't it? Again, people will hate it, and a 3-hour game will become 3 hours and 45 minutes. But I just feel like there needs to be something done to audit the officials on some of these calls.
I mean, you're right, it would solve the problem. And if I get a paper cut, amputating my arm solves the problem. If that happens, and there are people who advocate for that, absolutely advocate for that. You are not alone. I see fans who will advocate it, other reporters. I defy you to watch an ordinary college basketball game on, like, a random Tuesday night in February when they start every inbounds, every let's reset the game clock and things like that. And this game that should be 2 hours extends to 2 hours and 45 minutes, and the last 37 seconds are 10 minutes. If that happens, and again, gamblers be happy, whatever, I'm going to stop watching on Sundays, and I'm just going to be taping the games and fast forwarding, because I won't be able to take it anymore when they start reviewing holding and pass interference. I will not be able to take it.
The hot garbage system known as NFL Plus will certainly see an uptick in subscriptions for people watching condensed games.
Restart. Oh, it's working. Thank goodness.
Kind of like the game itself right now.
Yeah.
The game Monday night, obviously two teams involved, and it was a big win for the Buffalo Bills going into MetLife Stadium. And for all that we want to criticize and talk about the Jets about and what they've done wrong over the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year, probably the one threat with Tua Tagovailoa being out to their run in the AFC East. I don't know about you, Mike. I did not come away thinking that was one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the AFC. I thought they did enough to win. I thought that the defense made enough big plays, a couple pass breakups to Garrett Wilson, a couple pass breakups against Allen Lazard. But the Bills felt like, and I know that James Cook was out, the starting running back was out, and that matters to how that team wins when it's at its most effective. But a couple weeks ago, we were on this podcast and we talked about, can the Dolphins evolve? Can they win with defense? Can they win with multiple receivers being involved? And Matt Collins caught a touchdown last night, so he got in on the party. But it felt like they devolved into Josh Allen hero ball again. And that's fine against a elite Jets defense with an offense that's averaging 18 points per game. I just don't think you're beating Buffalo. I don't think you're beating Kansas City. I don't think that you're beating
Or Buffalo.
you
You
need
mean
to beat.
Baltimore?
Baltimore, yes.
Yeah. I'll say this. Baltimore looks like the better team right now. They beat the Bills a couple weeks ago. And when you start extending it to the whole NFL and you start talking about how good the Lions, Vikings look, yeah, I don't think the Bills are in that tier. But I also look at that game last night and say it was going to be 20-10 at halftime when they give up the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
It becomes 20-17. It looked to me like they were taking control of that game on both sides of the ball before halftime when it wasn't quite a flag fest as yet. Against a team with a good defense, against a team that's more or less full strength on the road, etc. And that was going well. And then they give up that Hail Mary and the game stays nip and tuck to the end and penalties start turning everything into gibberish. I'm not as worried about the Bills because I think that they overcame some of the problems we've seen in past weeks. They did. Shakir was back. They were getting the ball distributed a little more. Defense only had a couple of lapses. Again, one of the big plays for the Jets was a Hail Mary. The defense was playing well generally, for most of that game. I still think they're the second best team in the AFC right now. A third because of Mahomes, we'll call them third because the Chiefs are the Chiefs.
Yes.
Okay, but they're better than the Texans. Okay, they're better than anybody in their division. I don't know who you throw out there at this point. The Colts, the Bengals. I'm not sure.
No, I think
Steelers.
I think that it's the Texans and the Chiefs and the Ravens. I think those are the three that the Bills are knocking on the doorstep of.
Yeah.
And credit our good friend Jarrett Bailey for this, but he had a stat that Josh Allen has 2 more rushing touchdowns in his career than Christian McCaffrey does. And when you have a quarterback that makes that kind of impact, fine, but I just don't know that you can put that much on your quarterback's shoulders from a running game standpoint. It's one thing if you're Patrick Mahomes and you can win from the pocket, you can improvise, and your mobility sets other things up. And Josh Allen does a lot of those things as well. But it seems like so much of what the Bills do depends on Josh Allen being the man.
As opposed
against the ceiling.
As opposed to the Chiefs?
True.
Right. And Mahomes has a better track record, so you can point to that. And again, as opposed to the Ravens, who, Lamar Jackson kind of stirs that drink as well. This is what happens. I'm not worried about the touchdowns. I love that statistic, by the way. I'm not worried about the touchdowns because they've embraced the tush push. And when you're talking about 1-yard touchdowns and Josh Allen, weighs 280 pounds and he can just slam through things, that's not a big deal. So I guess, again, if we were talking about, if this was the NFC, and I would look at the Bills and say, you got to worry about the fact that some of these upstart teams are looking very strong. There's no upstart teams in the AFC. You're in there with that same group, that same clump that you're always with. And right now they've all had their moments and they've all been flawed. I'm certain you're behind the Ravens. I'm going to say you're behind the Chiefs. I'm not putting you behind the Texans, and I'm not putting you behind anywhere else.
We'll see about Houston. I think that they're still a plucky team that can surprise you. I think they have the pieces. I mean, with that pass rush did, I know it was against Drake May. I know it was against the New England Patriots. But Will Anderson with 3 sacks. You have Danielle Hunter doing his thing on the other side. You have a loaded secondary. Devin Stingley Jr. is really making his presence felt. And you have an ascending quarterback with CJ Stroud. And Nico Collins is out, but Tank Dell is back and healthy. You have Stephon Diggs. I'm not ready to count out the Texans, and they have a couple signature wins on the resume already. So we'll see what happens come January. But I think that the Bills need to keep finding ways to win where you're not just asking your quarterback to play hero ball and do it all on his own.
I'm not counting the Texans out. They're going to win that division handily. They've got room to grow. They have 0 running game. They're winning by having Stroud go out there and make those plays. And they have the pass rush. But again, they faced a pretty weak opponent this week. It might give us a false read how good they really are.
Absolutely. And you look in the NFC, and we're going to get to the interview and the conversation I had with Quentin Lake in a few minutes here. But one team that I think it's going to be really one of the more fascinating storylines over the second half of the season is how do the Detroit Lions respond to losing Aiden Hutchinson to the fractured tibia? One of the more heartbreaking and gut-wrenching injuries you'll see. He sacked Dak Prescott on Sunday afternoon, and immediately you could tell that he knew it was bad, that he said that he broke it. and you
Uh,
lose one of the best pass rushers in the sport on one of the more ferocious defenses in the league, how they respond is going to really dictate their ceiling and whether they can become a Super Bowl team, because he's that important to what they do.
yeah, to give you an idea of how important he is, give me one moment here as I'm trying to set my filters on a statistical form. And I'm vamping a little bit because it's slow to load. Here we go. Pressures. Pressures by defensive linemen for the, or defenders for the Detroit Lions. Aiden Hutchinson leads the Lions with 39 quarterback pressures. Second place is Levi Onwuzurike with 11. Third is Aleem McNeil with 11. So 39 pressures for Hutchinson, 22 for the next two guys in a row, 30 for the next three guys in a row, including Marcus Davenport, who I believe is injured right now on injured reserve.
Yeah,
Hutchinson is the pass rush. Hutchinson absolutely is the pass rush. It's not like there are bookends. It's not like there's Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, like we said before. It's not like TJ Watt and Highsmith, in Pittsburgh. And it's going to be, I don't know the solution for overcoming that in terms of how big an impact he has.
Yeah, I think that, I spoke to a scouting director on Sunday right after it happened, and he said the one thing that if you're Detroit that you can take solace in is that they have Brad Holmes as the GM, who's
Yeah.
not one of the best drafters in the NFL, but he's also, more importantly, maybe the best roster builder from a roster construction standpoint. When you look at all of the young talent, that they seem to have a philosophy and a plan, and they knew what they're doing there, and that they have depth, the kind of depth that would start on a lot of rosters. That was kind of that executive's takeaway. But
Right.
I'm with you. I think that pass rush might have been an area that, even if Hutchinson hadn't been injured, Holmes might have been knocking on doors and burning down phone lines to try and acquire at the deadline to get that secondary piece, because this is a roster that's capable of winning a Super Bowl this year. And the way that it's playing out in the NFC, save for maybe the Minnesota Vikings, they're the best team in that conference with the best chance to get to the Super Bowl. So they need to be pretty aggressive here because of the lack of depth, but especially because of losing Hutchinson going into this deadline.
Right, and roster building only gets so far. I just checked their injured reserve. Marcus Davenport's indeed on injured reserve, as I thought. John Comiskey, a role player, on injured reserve. Derek Barnes, one of the linebackers who I think is useful as a pass rusher, injured reserve. A fellow by the name of Nate Lyon, who is a defensive end on injured reserve. Like, you've reached the limits of what Brad Holmes could ever have done entering this season in terms of getting ready for that. The trick is, you're right. I think they would have looked for an edge rusher at the deadline. I'm wondering where that edge rusher is going to come from, because you look at the teams that might be sellers, so to speak, at the deadline, and a lot of them, one of their biggest problems is they don't have a lot of pass rush. The team I look at is the Jaguars, but they just extended Hines Allen, so he would have been the guy. I don't, Trayvon Walker. I mean, who are you moving at this point to get to the Lions?
I think it's Hassan Reddick. And I'll tell you a really interesting story.
Okay.
Sunday, the games are playing out, right?
Okay.
And Aiden Hutchinson got hurt about 45 minutes before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a text message. I still haven't verified this, so I don't want to put it out as me reporting anything. But some random number texted me that Hassan Reddick turned down blankety blank $1 million. I'm not going to fill in the figure for 1 year from the New York Jets. And I said, well, that's great insight. By the way, who is this?
Uh-huh.
And they responded, he hired Drew Rosenhaus. Now, I know Drew. I have Drew Rosenhaus's contact information. So this was not Drew Rosenhaus. Sure enough, Hassan Reddick hires Drew Rosenhaus on Monday morning. So whoever was reaching out to me but wanted to be squirrely about it and avoid letting me know who they were on to something. But you look at now, the window is open by the New York Jets. They've granted Hassan Reddick a brief window, unquote, according to multiple reports, to seek a trade. If you're connecting dots, Mike, aren't the Lions the logical landing spot here, given everything they have invested in this year?
Was that area code 856?
It might have been.
It might have been. You can tell me off camera, so we can say, because yeah, I live in Reddick territory. He does not live that far from me, nor does his family. So just doing a little sleuthing here on that end. But connecting the dots is right, where you have this disgruntled player. He's out there. He's been looking for a trade. He's been obviously fighting with his representation in ways that the rumor mill suggests are pretty weird. Anyway, yes. He gets rid of them. They get rid of him, I think is what actually happened. He gets Rosenhaus at the same time that this opening comes. And he would be a guy where you hope, assuming he's staying in shape and his mind is right and everything, third round pick. Get him, bring him in. I know there's cap dollars available to satisfy him, and
You
he might
figure
be
that out later. The salary cap is not real. You figure that out later. You restructure other players' deals. You get him in here for the
right.
final 10, 11 games in a postseason run. You have your pass rush, and Aaron Glenn has another weapon that he can just throw at quarterbacks,
Yeah,
just as he does relentlessly every single week.
he's the only one who really makes sense to say you can plug and play and get something Hutchinson flavored out of that. And by the way, for fans, we always talk about the edge rushers during the trade deadline because you don't have to learn much as an edge rusher. As a linebacker, as a safety, as a corner, you have to learn, cover 7, cover 6, thumbs, all these other things like that. Edge rusher, you can stick him on the edge and say, get him, go attack, kill, destroy. That's why they tend to move at this time of year more than other positions. And that's like, you don't have to teach Hassan Reddick enough much to get him up to speed and say, hey, it's 3rd and 10, get out there, go get a quarterback.
Yeah, two of the biggest trades at the deadline last year, where there were something like 18 moves that were made. Montez Sweat goes to the Chicago Bears,
Yes.
and Chase Young goes to the San Francisco 49ers to illustrate the point that it's easy to move edge rushers this time of year. Reddick, I think, would be the top of my target list if I were Brad Holmes and the Lions. But there's another interesting name with a little bit of contract issues of his own going into this year that never quite worked out with a team that's now underperforming. If the Bengals decide that the win over the Giants was a mirage and they'd rather go get draft capital and free up cap space to make Jamar Chase even more whole and happy beyond this year, Trey Hendrickson makes some sense and seems to be a culture fit for the Lions.
Blockbuster, and also you get Jamar Chase happy financially, and then they look around like, what direction is the team I just signed for going with? There could be a double-edged sword there. That's a tough one because, again, you are talking about a team that is coming off of a victory and a team that knows it is a history of slow starting and knows that, like, they're sending the message that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul when doing it. But, yeah, obviously that's a player that could help. We were, Aaron Schatz and I were spitballing, and when you start talking about, like, Emmanuel Agba and guys like that, you're spitting down the well.
You're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Right. And the only reason you can say, well, you got to do something is, again, I gave you the numbers there. 39 pressures, the next 2 guys, 11, one of them's on the IR. So you might just need something to say we get any pass rush, not to say we can even duplicate what Hutchinson brought to the table.
And the one other name that I think comes to mind is Darius Smith, because after what happened in Philadelphia on Sunday, we're probably a couple hours away from Kevin Stefanski and the front office walking out in front of the stadium and staking into the ground the "everything must go" sign. Darius Smith is probably near the top of that list. They're not winning anything anytime soon.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen with the quarterback situation there? We all know how it probably should play out.
Yes.
Amari Cooper is probably, one more ball thrown over his head to begging out.
He's Davante now. He has been promoted to Davante because Davante got traded.
Yes, and Zadarius Smith is one of those plug-and-play pass rushers, and if he lands with the Lions, obviously is pretty familiar with the NFC North, could be an impact player. And when you talk about Zadarius Smith, maybe a little bit more of a30-rental, but when you look at Reddick or Hendrickson, those are 2 guys that you could sign long-term to be part of that duo of rushers once Aiden Hutchinson comes back.
I'd be scared to sign Reddick long term right now after what happened in the last 6 months. But yeah, theoretically, because he's a little bit of a younger guy. I don't mind Zadarius Smith as a rental there. And again, that's often what you're doing this time of year. Rent a half dozen sacks. That's kind of what you're doing. We're trying to rent a half dozen sacks from somebody. And there's somebody that team is going to be motivated sellers if they're not already doing so as the deadline approaches.
No doubt. And Cooper's another guy who could be on the move, I would think.
Yeah.
I have a team or 2 that could be in mind for there. But let's talk some Rams. Let's find out what's going on with Los Angeles Rams. This is going to be a lot of fun. Joining us now, friend of the pod, the Los Angeles Rams starting safety and defensive captain, Quentin Lake joins us. Quentin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic today. How about yourself?
Doing great. Thanks for taking the time. And of course, you can follow Quentin on X at Quentin_Lake. And, defensive captain, that is a nice ring to it, doesn't it? How did it make you feel to have that kind of recognition from your teammates coming into this year?
Yeah, it was such an honor. You get caught up in the hard work and effort that you're, putting in on the field, especially through OTAs and training camp, that you kind of lose track of, what's really going on. And, luckily my teammates and the coaching staff and everybody in the building recognized, all the effort that's put in, and they ended up, honoring me captain. So, it was such an honor, such a blessing to be able to, have that achievement. But at the same time, I knew that, I wouldn't be in the position that I am today without them, without, the collaboration, all the hard work and effort that they put in. So yeah, it was definitely a great feeling to, get honor captain.
That's awesome stuff. And of course, you have those NFL bloodlines, right? Carnell Lake, one of the greatest defensive backs to ever put on a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform, is your father. So, in
Yeah.
terms of you growing up, watching him, and then, of course, coming up in your own career, what kind of lessons did you learn from him in terms of being that locker room leader and also in terms of shaping your own skill set as a safety?
Yeah, the biggest thing I learned from him in terms of how to carry myself on a day-to-day basis was control what you can control. And there are three main things that he told me, no matter what day, no matter, in any portion of your life, these are the three things that you can control is your attitude. How are you presenting yourself when you come into the building? Do you always have a smile on your face? Are you coachable? That was the first thing was attitude. The next thing was your effort. Are you going all out in practice? Are you treating practice like the game? Are you putting in the effort to study, doing the extracurriculars, whatever you need to do, to be able to, transition to my next controllable, which is being prepared. Preparation is huge. Obviously, we know that, being players in the NFL is who really is the most prepared team on Sunday. And that was another thing that you can control. Are you watching film? Are you making the right adjustments? Are you writing down notes? Are you making sure that you're doing your homework so that when Sunday comes, you're the most prepared and you're putting yourself in a position to make plays. So those are the three tidbits that he gave me. And then in terms of just football, he always told me, there really are no friends when crossing in the white lines, whether it's in practice or in the game. Obviously, it's a little bit different when you get into the season is you don't want to hurt your guys, but at the same time, you always want to have the mindset that you're trying to take somebody's job. And those are the things that he told me. If you want to have a long, lengthy career in the NFL, is you have to go out there and you got to make sure that you're trying to take somebody's job. Nothing's guaranteed. Everything is a fight each and every day. And the NFL is cutthroat. You can't ride the emotional wave. You can't really get into the the nitty gritty of the politics. At the end of the day, and like I've been talking about, is control what you can control, and making sure that each and every day you're prepared, whether you have an opportunity or not, to be able to put yourself in a position to be successful.
And you're off to a really successful start to the season yourself personally. 43 total tackles. You have the sack, kind of been a presence up near the line of scrimmage and in coverage as well. But I know you made a couple comments a couple weeks ago that you weren't necessarily satisfied with that high tackle number and that you wanted to make plays in different ways. What
Yeah.
do you kind of mean by that? And do you feel like you've accomplished a lot of the things so far that you set out to going into this season?
Yeah, tackling's great. Sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you end up accumulating a lot of tackles. For me, it's I kind of set my standard on impactful plays in a game. Can you come out a game with one impact play? And what I mean by impact play is, a sack, a forced fumble, an interception, maybe a couple PBUs, TFLs. Those are true impact plays. And I've obviously set a standard of, the goal is to come out with, one of those. Now tackling is great. I hit the franchise record for tackles for defensive back in the first 5 games, which was awesome. But at the same time is, those aren't necessarily impactful, game-changing plays. And I think, where I want to be in my career is, have those game-changing plays, have those, whether it's an interception, whether it's a forced fumble, stuff like that. And the opportunities are there. And I think for myself is understanding where my play opportunities are so that I can make those plays and have those things happen. So, never satisfied in the terms of my play, but always looking at, where can I improve and where are my opportunities where I can, change the game.
And you've talked a lot about the preparation during the week, that grind from Monday to Saturday going into a Sunday game and wanting to elevate your game, being more balanced in terms of interceptions and the impact plays. Are there things you can do during the week to kind of hone in on, all right, this week I'm going to make it my goal. I want to read the quarterback's eyes better, or I want to be able to play better man press coverage so that maybe when a guy has a ball bounce off his hand, I'm in a better position. Are there things that you can do during the week to help you reach some of those goals?
Yeah, those are definitely things. When you're watching the film, you kind of get an idea of, okay, how is the offense going to try and attack us, specifically on the defensive side. And then what I do is I write down not only do we have overall play opportunities in terms of grand scheme on the defensive side, but for myself, I write down what are my personal play opportunities. So if there is a certain, offensive formation that they come out with, or if there's a certain alignment, or if I'm in a certain technique, what are the things that I can do to make myself be in a better position to make plays? Obviously, you don't want to guess, but you want to make calculated, anticipated decisions that help you, be in a better position to make those plays. So that's what I've done, recently. And it's been helping me a lot. You kind of understand like, hey, if you get this look, put yourself in this technique or put yourself in this position where, if you get the play that you want, you can go out there, play fast and make a play.
And you've had the opportunity to practice against some elite receivers, and of course Matthew Stafford at quarterback. You can really iron sharpens iron during practice and all those things. But I'm telling you, man, just from afar, one thing I admire about Sean McVay and the Rams is you guys develop elite wide receivers, whether it's Puka, whether it's Tutu Atwell. Now you look at coming on the scene, Jordan Whittingham has really stepped into his own. He has like 208 pass receiving yards so far this year, really making an impact. What stands out when you're going up against Jordan with him as a player and kind of his potential as he develops?
Yeah, Jordan's been a huge help. He's definitely, maximized his opportunity with guys being down, but he's a fantastic player. And I think what happens is when you have an elite caliber of guys like we do, it kind of boosts everybody up. And that's what I've seen from Jordan is, he's been able to, capitalize, and when his numbers called, he's making plays. But to be able to go against these guys each and every day, they're so technical in what they do. And I think, off Sean McVay and the rest of the coaches do a great job of putting these guys in positions. Not only do they block well, not only do they catch the ball, but you talk about catch transition where they're getting yards after catch. So and then obviously you have number 9 Matthew Stafford. These guys, he's so precise with it. In terms of where he puts the ball, the spin on the ball, all that stuff, the accuracy. He's second to none. And going against him and going against these guys in practice, you have to be almost perfect at each and every snap. So it only gets you better. It only gets you more prepared. And, I'm so thankful to, have such great coaches and such great teammates to be able to push me to be a better player and also understand that, I'll be ready, Sundays, whether it's, going against any team because, of the looks that we get during the week.
And one of those teams that you went up against recently, I know the game didn't go the way you guys would have liked, but you had the chance to play against Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious as a defensive player, what's your read on Caleb, where he is as a quarterback right now? What sets him apart? What impressed you the most going up against him?
I think, his ability to make plays on his feet, he's very elusive. And he has a great arm. I think last week, the game in London that they played, I'm pretty sure they played the Jaguars.
It was wild, wasn't it? Watching
Yeah,
the game kind of slow down for him a little bit.
yeah, so like he's coming into his own, and I think, when you're a rookie, there's a lot of pressure coming in as a rookie quarterback. You want to succeed early, but at the same time, you have to understand that the NFL is a learning process when you're a rookie. I had to learn a lot when I was a rookie, and I think now we're seeing Caleb get into his groove. He looks a lot more comfortable back there. When we were going against him, we were trying to attack him in a lot of different ways, keep him in the pocket, make sure he's going through all his reads, and stuff like that. But now I think, he's getting to the point where he's more comfortable. Obviously he's gelling with the guys that he has at the receiver position and the tight end position. So, things are coming to his own. I think he's going to be a great quarterback in this league. It sucks that we didn't get the result that we wanted against him, but, at the same time, he's doing what he can, and obviously the results are showing for him. So, um, hopefully maybe if they make the playoffs and we make the playoffs, we get a little revenge match going on, and the outcome would be a little bit different. Rams on top, but yeah, he's progressing well in the NFL.
For sure. And, the big step towards getting back into that playoff conversation started with you guys getting the biggest win of the season against the San Francisco 49ers. And there are few rivalries in all the sports that are as heated as Rams Niners, right? And, I know that players all the time, probably yourself included, say, hey, it's one game at a time, 1 week at a time, all the games count the same. But what is a rivalry like that really like for you guys? Rams, Niners, NFC West always means a lot. What are those games like for you?
Yeah, sometimes you treat, those conference games as like almost playoff games. Those are, if you win the conference, you go to the playoffs. And no matter what your record, you go to the playoffs. It doesn't matter. So those are like the golden nuggets for us. Like those games are so important. You highlight those games during the week, especially for the, 49ers because of our long history. We battled them in the playoffs in 21, ended up coming on top. And they obviously have had their fair share of success in the playoffs and then obviously making it to multiple Super Bowls. So, those are, nitty-gritty games that, obviously, our first matchup we came out on top, which was fantastic. But, you kind of highlight those games on your calendar to make sure that, you really got to be ready. Obviously, like you said, you have to be ready every week, but there's a little bit more of an emphasis because of they're in your division. And I know every team will tell you that across the league is whether you're in the AFC or whether you're in the NFC, the games in your division are just so important because you win your division, you go to the playoffs. So luckily we're doing okay in our division. We're 1-1, which is good. But obviously we have to focus on this week, and when those conference games come, they come, and we'll be ready for those when they come.
And obviously, a lot of football left to be played this year, and you got the Niners win under your belt already. What's the biggest key to turning things around and building some of the momentum and getting things kind of snowballing in the right direction for the defense? And I guess offensively, it just comes down to getting healthy around Matthew, right? Getting the weapons back, getting everybody back on the field. But for you guys on defense, what do you think is the biggest key to righting the ship?
I think the biggest thing for us is, getting the job done. That's one thing I want to emphasize this week is, get the job done. We have to play a complete game. We can't start off slow and try to work our way back. We can't start off hot and then end up, teetering off at the end of the game. We have to play, all four quarters have to be, solid. And I think another thing for us is takeaways, taking the ball away, limiting the explosive plays, and, being able to impact the game so that we put our offense in better positions. And that's, obviously something, we've emphasized right when we came back after the bye, and something that we're going to continue to emphasize, for the rest of the season. But, those are the main things that I think as a defense we need to work on, so that we can obviously get the result that we want on Sundays.
For sure. And I'll certainly be watching from afar what the Rams are doing. It's been a lot of fun, really insightful. Quentin, last one before I let you go, a little bit of fun here. We're doing this today on a day when you see Davante Adams get traded to the New York Jets. You don't have to face him on Sunday when you guys take on the Raiders. You'll get Amari Cooper getting dealt to, he went to the Buffalo Bills, giving Josh Allen another weapon, two superstars across the league, right? But when you're looking around the schedule when it comes out every year,
I know it's like you get these guys traded. Although you might not play. Might not play Davante on the Raiders. We play the Jets, and we play the
right?
Bills. So it's like you see these moves and you're like, okay, well, they just added another weapon, and you have to get ready for that. But this time during the year is always crazy. There are so many moving parts. You see it all the time, whether it's in social media or just on the news, and it would be breaking news. Somebody
Yeah.
got traded to somewhere. So. Um,
But
it's
who's the
always
certified matchup for you? Who's the wide receiver that you're going to look down your schedule and say, you know what, I want that guy. I want to go one on one against him. When the schedule comes out every year, who's the standard bearer receiver in your opinion?
I mean, you look across the league and it seems like, all teams have a premier receiver. I think some that for me that you kind of want to see and challenge yourself a little bit. Obviously, you have the Miami Dolphins on Monday night. You have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then obviously Odell Beckham. Um, I think the Jets too. You look at that, Garrett Wilson, and then Devontae. That's going to be a two-headed monster right there. Um, Justin Jefferson in 2 weeks after the Raiders game on Thursday night. Like, so you look down the schedule, you can
You
really,
getting them all.
yeah, you have them all. You have all the top guys. Obviously, we went against St. Brown, um, and my guy St. Brown. First week of the season, so there's not one that I want more than the other. I think really just having the opportunity to go against these guys and really, these guys are proven. And as a guy that I wouldn't necessarily say I'm proven to be able to go against these guys, and obviously you want to shut them down and do well. That's a big challenge, and these are the preparation, all that stuff is going to be key and critical when you get these matchups. So it's going to be fun. Competition breeds out excellence, and to be able to go against guys that are, not only very competitive but also fantastic players, that's what you want, especially as a defensive back. So, looking honestly, there's no one matchup I'm looking forward to them all.
You got a lot of them. You got a lot of big time receivers coming your way down the rest of the season. He's Quentin Lake, the starting safety and defensive captain for the Los Angeles Rams. You can follow him on Twitter at Quentin_Lake. Quentin, appreciate the time. We'll talk to you further up the road, my friend, and best of luck the rest of the season.
Matt, appreciate you having me on. This was awesome.
They're going to be a fun team to watch, Mike, the Rams in that division. And you look at the 49ers, they bounce back against Seattle. Who knows what the Seahawks are at this stage? It seems like their outcome hinges on which Geno Smith shows up at the stadium. But if the Rams can get healthy, they could make some noise.
That's it. When they get their guys back, they're going to be trouble. I think the Seahawks are on the decline, and our Rams are a team we tend to sleep on because we tend to think that they were last year's news, but they keep coming back. And I think they have a chance to come back this year.
And that defense is coming together, and Quentin Lake has been a nice part of that. And seeing him elevated up to becoming captain is a huge move for him personally. There could be another huge move made in the AFC North. The Pittsburgh Steelers, fresh off a road win in Las Vegas, where Justin Fields rushed for 2 touchdowns, only passed for 145 yards though, but it didn't seem to matter because they decided, as I wrote in 4 Downs on Monday morning, they were going to morph into the most Pittsburgh Steelers-y team in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers and just gash you repeatedly with Najee Harris, let the mobility of Justin Fields let loose and see what happens there. I might be one of the bigger Justin Fields proponents still out there, that I think he still has some ceiling still to reach. But even watching that game and watching Pat Freiermuth open at the sticks along the boundary and Fields float the ball 4 feet over his head, maybe it is time. Maybe Mike Tomlin has seen enough, and maybe it is Justin Fields that's holding back this offense.
I was going to say, have you spoken to Jarrett Bailey lately? The Justin Fields Kool-Aid, I should probably get him for Christmas, a Justin Fields Kool-Aid cozy or something like that. And, Fields has played better than I think his reputation. I think he played better than he played last year for most of last year. When we were talking about roughing the passer earlier with Aaron Rodgers, Justin Fields has benefited or been roughed 6 times. So 6 roughing the passer penalties against Justin Fields this year. Last year, Josh Allen had the record with led the league with 6 roughing the passer penalties all year.
All year.
Justin Fields has had a year's worth of roughing the passer penalties. So what does that mean? He threw an interception, roughing the passer, negated it. It was 3rd and 18. He threw like a little pass over the middle for like 5 yards. Roughing the passer, negated it. When you get 90 yards, bonus yards, and you're not really generating that much offense to begin with, makes what you're doing look better than it was. I don't think. Fields is doing well game management standpoint. I know that they don't have a lot of weapons. The offensive line is not very good. This is a team that routinely only has 6 points at halftime.
Yeah.
That said, I'm not sure what Russell Wilson brings to the table at this point at all.
No, and of course, before we start recording the podcast today, the report comes out. Mike Tomlin at his press conference says that the plan is to give Russell Wilson some first-team reps. Right. I've covered football long enough. I've been a beat reporter long enough. You don't take first-team reps away. You don't take one first-team rep away from your starting quarterback if he's your starting quarterback. So this seems like on a Tuesday that it's trending towards Russell Wilson being the starting quarterback this week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We won't know for sure until later in the week, maybe not up until game time on Sunday, depending on how everything plays out. But I just don't know that when you look at how limited the offense is, where it's basically Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, and Justin Fields' mobility and scrambling, that if you take that element away, I don't know how much more upside you get from putting Russell Wilson in there, especially with George Pickens running routes at 3/4 speed anyway, as your only real legitimate wide receiver. It just feels like this is a bit of a panic move when maybe there's no reason to be panicking.
That's what I'm trying to figure out here. So one thing you see internally is that Tomlin and Arthur Smith aren't really team Justin Fields in terms of what they've seen. You and I can talk about it. Jared can talk about it, whatever. They know how limited what they're doing is. Okay. So that's probably why they're doing this. At the same time, we know how limited Russell Wilson has been for the last 3 years. We know he prefers to play hero ball. Pickens is the only guy to play hero ball with, and he sometimes is on Planet Pickens, Planet Steelers receiver. So, I don't get it. I think the timing is weird. I think you wait for a game that didn't end in a blowout. And the blowout, again, like you said, was caused by a good running game, 2 peanut punches by TJ Watt, a blocked kick, all these other things. But you might as well stick with what is working right now rather than what your risk here is Wilson comes out, he looks rickety, he's taking sacks, he can't move as well. He's not really meshing with the offense. And then you have to go back to Fields. And I don't know what you gain from this.
Not only you have to go back to Fields and not know what you gain from that, the offensive teammates seem to be responding to Justin Fields. They seem to like him.
Right.
And I feel like you could really, light a fuse within that offense and in that locker room, and not in a great way. But they need to find some sort of offensive spark. They need to find something in that passing game. I think I might have the solution.
Is it Amari Cooper?
It is not, because there's no chance that the Browns are going to trade Amari Cooper within the division. And sure enough, those words come out of my mouth that at 4:30 this afternoon, when this is long in the can and out into the ether, Amari Cooper will be a Steeler. But I do think that Omar Khan needs to do something. And they couldn't get, Davante Adams. He goes to the Jets. They couldn't get Brandon Ayuk in the summertime. He stayed in San Francisco. They haven't stopped looking for receiver help. And if we've watched the Jets over the last 2 weeks, if there's one thing that we've noticed, it's that Aaron Rodgers simply cannot stand Mike Williams. He showed up in London, threw his hands up in the air after the interception to close out that game, blames him after the game for quote unquote running the wrong route. He threw it to the quote unquote red line when maybe Williams should have been running the blue line on that play. These guys aren't in the same chapter. They might not be reading the same book, but they're certainly not on the same page right now. And the Jets just gave up a conditional 3rd-round pick that if they, by hook or by crook or some miraculous fashion, go to the AFC Championship game, that becomes a 2nd-round pick you're giving up to the Las Vegas Raiders for Davante Adams. Why not? If you're the Steelers, toss him a 4th-round pick for Mike Williams.
Let's make it a 6th-round pick at this point, because you got a guy coming off of multiple injuries who is not meshing right now. And while, we all know Mike Williams' talent, he's pretty much a jump ball deep guy. He is a one-dimensional jump ball deep guy.
Who likes jump ball deep guy receivers, though?
Russell Wilson.
Yes.
So there you see it. And Pickens is kind of a jump ball deep guy. The problem with him is they ask him to do literally anything else, and he kind of goes on planet, Williams for a while, planet Pickens for a while. So I guess the one thing about Williams, he should come cheap right now. Like, he's the odd man out, like you said. They can't hold anybody over a barrel. Rodgers would be like, I don't care, just get him out of the locker room.
He's taking targets away from my guy, Allen Lazard, and I'm going to be throwing to Davante now. So what use do I have for him?
I got 2 guys, and Wilson. I'll throw it to Wilson 22 times because he's open, so he is my guy because he is open. So yeah, so if the strategy now is handoffs up the middle and jump balls, and TJ Watt and more TJ Watt, okay, all right, do it. I think the Steelers might wind up better than the Jets in that scenario.
I don't disagree, because they have the better defense. They have a comparable running game, but it just seems like they need to do something. If you're going to make the switch or not, it's not sustainable to win games 17-13. It's just not. You need somebody.
We've been saying that about the Steelers for 6 years. It's not sustainable what they're doing. And it's not because you go 9-8. You don't do anything that really gets people excited. It's sustainable to be a 500-ish team that way. But yeah, that's
why sneak into the playoff. You might sneak in as a wild card.
Yeah, here you are. You're the number 7 seed, and you lose to the Chiefs in the 1st round. Congratulations,
Mike. What's your circular game this weekend?
What did I put on the thing? Would I put the Packers against the
CJ Strouds?
The CJ Stroud, the Texans, and we talked about them earlier. 2 teams that I want to see more from. We talked about the CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans earlier. Impressive win. It's a win that I thought they should have closed out at halftime. They were up like 14-7 at halftime. Should have been 24-0 if they were playing up to their capacity against a weak opponent with a rookie quarterback. Need to see more from their running game. Need to see if they're limiting penalties. Need to see just maybe a little more consistency from their defense that's boom or bust. Packers are in the under the radar right now. I think I know what your circlets game is going to be. They're like the number 3 team in the strongest division that I've seen in a long time. And, I want to see 4 consistent quarters from them. Unbelievable half from Jordan Love last week against the Cardinals. Then they kind of they got the win, but they kind of puttered. Unbelievable half against the Vikings, but it was the second half because they puttered for a half before that. I want to see if I really am buying into this Packers team saying, yes, you could sneak away with that division, or certainly you could be the top wild card team. One way they can do that is by beating the Texans. Let me
For
get
sure, it's a big game.
what do you got? What do you got?
I have the potential NFC North Championship game preview of the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions, and it was actually a coin flip for me because we also have Niners Chiefs this weekend, which is another great game. But the Vikings Lions, it had so much intrigue for so many reasons. It's the litmus test game for the Vikings. We've talked about the Vikings. We've given them credit for the win in comeback fashion in London. We've given them credit for beating the teams in prime time that they beat, the playoff caliber teams. This is the test of your mettle against the defending division champions, an explosive offense that just beats you 1,000 different ways from Sunday, coming off a blowout win where they chased the Cowboys starters out of the building with 10 minutes to go. And we find out about the Detroit Lions and what that defense is without Aiden Hutchinson. We're going to find out a lot about these two teams and the state of the race in the NFC North when it's Vikings and Lions.
It might not just be the NFC North title. It could be an NFC Championship game preview.
Could be.
Really could. Based on the vibes coming out of here in Philly, the vibes coming out of Dallas, which are toxic, and the vibes coming out of 49ers camp, which are still kind of
wait and see in San Francisco. It's like they're just waiting for Christian McCaffrey to walk back into the building and save them. They're waiting for Ricky Pearsall Jr. to get on the field and elevate the receiving core. They're just seem like they're waiting around to start firing on all cylinders.
Right.
Maybe the car doesn't start this time.
Maybe it doesn't, or maybe when it does start, you're behind the Vikings and you're behind the Lions.
Yeah, so it should be a great game on Sunday. Lions and Vikings should be a fun game. Packers and Texans. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how much I loved seeing Romeo Doubs score a touchdown after the issue with him, whatever mental health he was dealing with and being unhappy with his role and wind up getting suspended. I think we saw how much he means to that team by how elated his offensive teammates were that he reached the end zone on Sunday afternoon.
And I love that we get a resolution of this in a couple of weeks. Whatever goes on, it doesn't turn into a drama that absorbs his life, the season, whatever. It sounds like a lot of adults put the brakes on a bad situation, whether it was in his personal life or the professional life, and they're coming together. That's encouraging. That's what we want to see, not just in the NFL, but in the world when people are struggling.
Of course. And any parting shots from you, Mike?
I think that was my parting shot. How about you?
I love it. Just as always, if you want to subscribe to the podcast in the Apple Podcast Store, leave us those 5-star reviews. They help grow the show. Be sure you subscribe to Mike Tanier's 2 Deep Zone. Mike, what's coming up with the 2 Deep Zone this week?
I've got no idea. Let me think for a second. Talking a little bit about the Comeback Player of the Year race, which is on hold because the AP announced that Sam Darnold's not allowed to be Comeback Player of the Year. So they actually took all the bets off the board in that. Also going to be digging more into Aiden Hutchinson later in the week. Going to be digging into Derrick Henry a little bit this week. Got a lot coming up. What do you got coming up?
Yeah, today, just before the podcast, published a piece speaking to executives inside the league on Davante Adams and the impact that he might or might not make. You got a little teaser of it here on the pod on the New York Jets offense. We'll have a mailbag on Friday and potentially a feature on a breakout running back to be named later, assuming we can lock down this interview. We'll see what happens there. But great stuff. Subscribe to Mike Tanier's 2 Deep Zone on Substack. Subscribe to Between the Hashmarks on Substack as well if you want to read my insider reporting and analysis. And thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk to you next week.